The sphere was already warm when Investigator Renn Soval lifted it from the containment tray. That was the first thing wrong with it. The vault's temperature had been held at 4 degrees above absolute baseline for 6 days, since the recovery team brought the object in from Sector Vrenn's outer margin. Everything in the room was cold. The tray was cold. Renn's examination gloves were cold against her palm ridges, the familiar chill she associated with precision work, with the particular stillness required to handle artifacts that did not belong to any catalogued civilization. The sphere should have been cold. It was a smooth oblate object, roughly the diameter of a drath fist, made of a material her scanner refused to classify beyond the single entry it could manage: composition, unknown. No alloy register match, no polymer match, no mineral equivalent on file. The scanner had a file of 11,000 materials. It matched everything eventually. It had been trying for 6 days. Renn set the sphere back in the tray and noted the warmth in her log as a datum, not a concern. She was 24 years old and had spent 3 years in the Galactic Cartographic Authority's Anomaly Division, cataloging objects that defied easy classification. She had handled 17 unregistered artifacts in that time. None of them had been warm. She picked it up again. It was the size of a thing meant to be held. That was the second thing wrong with it. The authority's lead analyst, a senior archivist named Pel Vaz, had flagged the sphere's dimensions in his preliminary report with a notation Renn had read twice before entering the vault. Ergonomic for a species with a handspan of approximately 18 to 22 centimeters, 5-digit grip, moderate finger length. The drath handspan averaged 11 centimeters. The notation did not name the species the sphere appeared designed for, because naming it would have required Pel to write a word the authority's internal protocol treated with a certain deliberate care. He had left it implicit. The implication was clear enough. The sphere fit Renn's hand imperfectly, the way an object fits when it was built for something larger. She was aware of this with unusual precision, as though the object's geometry was teaching her the shape of the hands that had made it. She set it down and opened the comparative file on her tablet. The authority had recovered 5 objects from the outer margin of the forbidden boundary in the past 40 years. 3 had been inert structural components, materials analyzed into categories that did not correspond to any known engineering tradition, but that were at least measurable. 1 had been a fragment eventually filed as navigational apparatus, though the designation was contested, and the researcher had subsequently transferred to an inner system, posting for reasons he described as personal. The 5th object was a disk, flat, featureless, locked in Subvault 7 since the day it arrived, after the technician who first handled it had spent 4 hours in the authority's medical bay unable to explain what she had experienced, and then requested, in writing, never to be assigned to the Anomaly Division again. The disk was in Subvault 7. The subvault was sealed. Renn had read the medical report on that technician. It was 3 pages and contained 4 sentences describing what she had experienced, buried between paragraphs of physiological data. The 4 sentences were: she felt she was being measured, she felt the measurement was accurate, she felt the result was something she already knew, she felt that knowing it again in that way was something she could not withstand. The medical officer noted no physical injury. The report described it as perceptual overload of uncertain origin and recommended restricted access to unregistered artifacts for 6 months. The technician had never returned to the division. Renn held the sphere again. It was still warm. She had been in the vault for 40 minutes. Protocol required a second observer behind the glass of the observation window at the vault's west wall. The second observer today was cartographer Yeth, a colleague 2 years senior to Renn, who had been present for all 6 prior examination sessions, and who had, since the start of this one, been sitting very still behind the glass with his stylus on the table and his notes untouched. Renn had noticed this. She had not addressed it. Yeth was behind glass and could not affect the examination, and the examination had a log to complete. She rotated the sphere under her scanner's lamp, a narrowband emitter tuned for surface detail, and the object's surface resolved into something invisible in ambient light, a texture, not random. The sphere carried a pattern of micro-scaled indentations distributed across its entire area in an arrangement the scanner's imaging processor attempted to classify as decorative, then as informational, then gave up and labeled undetermined. Renn studied the pattern. It looked like something she had seen before. She could not identify where. The familiarity was of the wrong kind, not recognition, but the fit of a thing into a category in her mind she had not known was there, the way certain musical intervals produce unease, because they resolve to something the listener did not expect to want resolved. She felt the sphere's warmth through the glove and thought, this was made to be examined. It was made for someone like me to hold and study and turn, and try to understand. The thought arrived with unusual clarity. She set it aside and kept working. At the 50-minute mark she ran the standard resonance test, a brief low-frequency pulse to measure internal structure. The test had run clean on all 6 prior sessions. No internal voids, no mechanical components, no energy cells. Just material, opaque to the pulse, solid all the way through. This time, the pulse returned something different. The reading it carried was a structured signal embedded in the return wave, in a frequency band the pulse had not used. The scanner flagged it. Renn confirmed it was not equipment error and noted it in the log. The signal was in a format the scanner did not recognize. She ran it through the authority's xenographic communication database, 11,000 cataloged signal formats, and received no match. She ran it a second time, tolerance thresholds widened. The database returned one result, similarity at 31% to a format in a restricted file she did not have clearance to open. The file's designation number corresponded to communications sourced from the boundary region. She noted this. She did not attempt to open the file. At the 58th minute, the warmth in the sphere changed. Not temperature, the surface thermometer showed no shift, but the quality of it changed, the way the feel of a room changes when someone enters it, differently distributed, as though the air has rearranged itself to account for a new presence. Renn noticed it the way she noticed most things, registered it, filed it, kept moving. She was rotating the sphere through a second imaging pass, documenting the micro-texture in quadrant sections, and she had completed 3 quadrants when the 4th came into the lamp's focus and she stopped. The pattern in the 4th quadrant was different from the other 3, not in density or structure. The indentations were the same size, depth, general distribution. Different in one specific way, this section of the pattern looked like something she recognized. Not almost. Not the wrong familiarity of the earlier impression. She recognized it directly, the way she recognized her own handwriting. It looked like the mapping notation she had used in her first year at the authority. Her own system, the one she had developed privately for her own field notes, because the authority's standard notation was too coarse for the margin annotation she preferred. A system no one else used because she had never shared it. The indentations in the 4th quadrant were not her notation. They were too small, too precisely regular, too obviously part of the sphere's original surface. But their arrangement matched it the way a reflection matches. Not the same thing, but the same shape read backwards. She set the sphere down. Her hands were not shaking. She checked them steady. She looked at the observation window. Yeth had not moved. His stylus was where he had set it, and he was looking at the sphere, not at her, at the sphere, with an expression she did not immediately have a name for. Then she did. It was the expression of someone watching something confirm what they already feared. Renn picked up the sphere one more time. She held it in both hands fully, the way it was designed to be held, and she looked at it and waited. She was not certain what she was waiting for. The thought she had set aside at the 50-minute mark returned. This was made to be examined. And a second thought connected to it that she had not allowed herself to complete before. It was made to examine back. The sphere was warm in her hands. The microtexture was visible without the scanner lamp now, as though it had come closer to the surface, and in the half-light of the vault she could see the entire pattern, all 4 quadrants shifting. Slowly. Imperceptibly slowly, the kind of motion that would not register on a scanner, because it was too gradual for the instrument's sampling rate, but visible to the naked eye of a mind trained to see surfaces in detail. The indentations were not rearranging themselves into something new. They were rearranging themselves into something specific. They were rearranging themselves into her. Not her face, not her form, her mind. The particular shape of the way she ordered information, the hierarchy of what she noticed and what she filed and what she returned to and what she avoided. She did not know how she knew this with such certainty. She knew it the way she knew her own handwriting, not by describing the rules, but by having lived inside the system long enough to recognize its outline from outside. The sphere was showing her what she was, and it was accurate. That was what the medical report's 4 sentences had described: the measurement, the accuracy, the knowledge already known, the inability to withstand knowing it again this way. Renn understood now what the technician had not been able to explain. It was not the content that broke something. The content was nothing she did not already know. It was the source. To see the architecture of your own cognition reflected back by something that should not know it, something sealed in a vault for 6 days, drawing no power, running no active scan, and yet spending those 6 days attending to the shape of every mind that came near it, assembling a precise record, and now offering each of them that record with the patience of a thing that was built for exactly this, and has been waiting. She set the sphere down and stepped back. Her hands were still not shaking. She checked again, still steady. She turned to the observation window. Yeth had not moved. His face held the expression she had named. She said through the intercom, "Yeth, how long have you been sitting like that?" He said, "Since the resonance test." "Did you see the pattern change?" A pause. "I saw it change the second session, 3 days ago." He was a careful researcher, known in the division for filing thorough notes on everything. She said, "Why didn't you log it?" A longer pause. "I don't know what category it belongs to." She understood that. She looked back at the sphere. It sat in the tray, warm, patient, the microtexture visible at the surface, neither moving nor still. She could no longer be certain which, and she had stopped trusting her instrument's sampling rate to settle the question. She closed her examination log. She had 40 minutes of data from this session, complete and detailed, and none of it told her what the sphere was. She knew what it did. Knowing what it did was not the same thing. A tool's function was not its purpose, and the function of this one, to read the shape of whatever mind held it and show that mind its own knowing, was not. She was nearly certain, the point. The point was something the function served. She could not determine it. The restricted file at 31% probably held more, and that file was sealed because whatever it contained had caused the authorities' leadership to seal it, which meant its contents were, in the authorities' judgment, more damaging than the cost of leaving the division working without them. That pattern she recognized. She had read it in the other files. Renn initiated the vault seal protocol and wrote her examination report in the corridor outside, sitting on the floor with her back to the wall. The report was thorough. She described the warmth, the material classification failure, the resonance signal, the microtexture shift, the database match at 31%, and the subjective experience of holding the object fully seated. She described that experience in the same 4-sentence format the earlier medical report had used. She felt she was being measured. She felt the measurement was accurate. She felt the result was something she already knew. She felt that knowing it again, in that way, was something she would need time to withstand. She did not recommend destruction. She did not recommend further examination. She recommended the vault remain sealed, and that the log be filed alongside the Sub-Vault 7 records in the same restricted tier, accessible only to personnel who had first read the earlier technician's 4 sentences, so they would know what they were agreeing to before they went in. Then she wrote the line the authorities' format required at the close of every examination, a summary of assessed origin. She sat with that field for a long time. Then she wrote human manufacture probable, purpose, unknown, function to show a mind what it contains precisely and without error. Disposition, the sphere is to remain in the vault. It has already found everything it came to find. She filed the report, stood, and walked toward the station's outer ring. Behind her the vault held its seal and its warmth. Ahead, the observation tier looked out at the boundary, the dead margin of the star charts, the sector the authority had stopped mapping 40 years before she was born. She stood at the viewport for a while. She was not thinking about what she had seen in the sphere's 4th quadrant. She had set that aside. She was thinking about the fact that humans had made this thing, had built a device that reached into any mind attentive enough to examine it, and showed that mind the exact shape of its own knowing, accurate and complete, and had left it past the boundary where anyone determined enough would eventually find it. Not as a trap, not as a weapon, as a message perhaps, or a question. She was not certain. She wanted to know what the question was. She turned away from the viewport and went to find somewhere to sleep.